Hello and welcome, I'm Ken Gaudi, and in this video we will explore the idea of creating a practice routine. So how do we go about creating a practice routine? Well, the first question to answer is whether you need a practice routine or not, and that will depend on your practice session at the moment. What do you actually do when you practice? Let's consider two individuals. One individual is taught by a teacher, the other individual teaches themselves. The individual that is taught by a teacher, well, that teacher will give them songs to learn that are appropriate to the level, will give them scales to learn and give them techniques to follow. That student will then go away, the student will come back, and the teacher will evaluate whether they were successful or not. If that student was successful, then the teacher will give them more difficult songs to learn, some other scales to learn, and some different techniques to follow. If that student was not successful, then the teacher will give them some tips on how to become successful. So what is actually happening is that the teacher is guiding that student down a path for success. Now let's contrast that with somebody who's teaching themselves. That person has nobody guiding them, nobody giving them positive feedback or criticism, nobody motivating them or encouraging them. Any long-term goals or short-term goals or songs or techniques they'll have to come up with themselves. And this can lead to the danger that every time that they practice, they only limit themselves to learning a few things. For example, when they go into their practice session, all that would consist of is playing songs, learning songs, or playing along to backing tracks. And this can then lead to a lack of motivation. So if this is the case with you, then a practice routine will be very beneficial, because then you can list all of the fundamentals and essentials that you need to learn and allocate a time to each of them, which means that every time that you practice, you know that you'll be hitting all of these things in your practice session, and that will cause you to develop into a well-rounded musician. The next question that we need to answer is how often should we practice? Now this will depend on your circumstances, but it's well known that people make a lot of progress when they do something often. It is far better to practice frequently in shorter periods than for longer periods, but less often. The brain is able to retain the knowledge and it's easier to build muscle memory. So I suggest that you practice every day or as close to this as possible. The next question to answer is how long should our practice sessions be? Now that would depend on your circumstances. All of us are different. We all learn differently. We all study differently. Some of us are gifted and talented and can pick up things quite quickly, while the rest of us have to work at it very hard. But I would suggest that you should practice for at least an hour a day. It has been said that Charlie Parker used to practice between 11 and 15 hours a day over a period of 3 to 4 years. Now most of us do not have the luxury to do that. And quite frankly, I suppose most of us really wouldn't want to do that since we have lives to live. But if you practice 1 hour a day, every day, then that is a good start. So on the understanding that we're going to practice every day for at least an hour a day, we can create a practice routine around that. I'm going to fill in this sheet which has 2 columns. The first column showing the activities that we will do, and the second column showing the time allocated. You may want to create your own more detailed one for yourself. We will start by filling in the last section, which consists of cleaning the saxophone. This is something that everybody should do after a practice session and should last about 5 minutes. This leaves us 55 minutes of practice time. Now, if you're not too sure about how to clean your saxophone, I have created a detailed video looking at all aspects of cleaning the saxophone, cleaning the reeds, mouthpiece, etc. You may want to watch that. The first activity should be some form of warm-up, so I've allocated 5 minutes for tone development. This can consist of playing long tones, playing overtones, or just playing the mouthpiece to develop your embouchure and voicings. Your tone is very important. It's what makes you stand out from other people. Yet playing these activities can be quite tedious and boring, and that's why it's been allocated less time. Bearing in mind that whenever you play the saxophone, you should be thinking about your tone, and so it's naturally incorporated in all of the activities during your practice session. The next activity lasts twice as long, for 10 minutes, and consists of scales and articulation. Scales are important as it builds your fluency in different keys and is the backbone of fast passages. So you can use this time to practice your major and minor scales. You could play them in thirds and fourths, you could play them as arpeggios, you could play them as triads and their inversions, you could play them in patterns or an interrupted scale. You could vary the rhythm and play them in triplets or in swing time. You could tongue them on the on-beat or off-beat. You could tongue them for every 4 notes. And once you've done that, then you possibly move on to other scales such as the pentatonic, the blues scale, the whole tone scale, diminished, etc. Obviously, when doing this, you should be thinking about your tone, And you should also be thinking about building up your speed and therefore using a metronome in order to play these notes cleanly. The next activity is the longest and lasts for 30 minutes. After spending some time practicing things which are not really interesting, now we move into the fun zone where we get to learn new songs and we get to improvise. Here you should be using a tuner, a metronome, and you should occasionally be video recording yourself so you can hear how you sound, you can see your posture, and you can see how you move your fingers up and down the saxophone. You may be surprised when you listen back to your recording, and you may find that there are some things that you need to work on, such as your timing and your tone. The songs that you learn to play should be difficult enough to push and stretch you. Learning by ear is good, but so is sight reading. I have created a section on music theory and sight reading if you want to look at that. The last activity is a short session on techniques. Here you get to learn and practice different techniques. These could be the fundamentals or the elite stuff. Now, I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't wait to practice the elite stuff, but that you should practice everything together. For example, practicing altissimo notes is hard, but if you were to start today and you were to practice a little bit every time you practice, then over the long term, you will soon master it. Now, there are so many different types of techniques that we have to learn, and only a few are listed here, which gives a varied and interesting end to your practice session. So that was some ideas on how to create a practice routine. If you have a practice routine like this, then you'll always challenge yourself. In addition to having a practice routine, you should also set yourself some short-term and long-term goals. Think about what you want to accomplish in a year's time. Do you want to be able to play faster? Do you want to learn 20 jazz standards? Do you want to be able to master the altissimo range? Well, if you do, then think about what you need to do to accomplish these things and then implement it. When you're not practicing, make sure you give yourself time to listen to some good music, because it will shape the concept of the music in your head, which will eventually come out in your playing. Now, lastly, let me say thank you for watching this video. If it was informative, if it was helpful at all, then give it a like and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.